Next, we have word form errors. This is a very common category of error because it really can be with a variety of parts of speech, and it just happens a lot. So this type of error means the way a noun, an adjective, or an adverb, not a verb, looks on the page is wrong. So the only difference between a verb form error and a word form error is that a verb form error is always with a verb. A word form error means that it's with something other than a verb. Very rarely, but sometimes, I write VF/WF above an error. And that's because the person is using that word like a verb, but it really isn't a verb. Or the person makes the word look different from a verb, but it should be a verb. So sometimes I kind of combine these if in the context of the sentence it's a little hard to tell if we're talking about a verb or we're just talking about a word. A different word in the sentence, like a noun, adjective, or adverb. So again, a word form error means that the way a noun, an adjective, or an adverb looks on the page is wrong. So there's a lot of reason for this. It could be a count or non-count or a plural error with an article, a problem with an article. You don't have a the or an a or an and you should. Or with an S ending. You put an S where there shouldn't be an S. You didn't put an S and there should be an S. Could be a superlative error. Superlative meaning good, better, best. It could be a word derivation error. It looks like a noun, but it should be an adjective. You're trying to write an adjective, but you wrote a noun by accident. Something like that. This is a very common word form error to make, the one I have as an example here. Be part of a team sport like soccer, basketball, or volleyball has many effects. So here, this verb be is, I called it a word form error. Why did I call it that? Well, in English, if you start a sentence without a subject, and you just say be, do, act, any sort of verb as the first word, we consider that a command. That's the only time in English we never put a subject at the beginning of a sentence, is when we're commanding someone. Don't walk on the street. Go now. Be good. Act better. That's the only time we would ever have a verb as the first word. And most of the time in our writing, especially in our academic writing, we don't do that. So starting a sentence with be makes it sound like a command, but the rest of the sentence is really not a command, and it's an explanation. Be part of a team sport like soccer, basketball, or volleyball has many effects. You're not commanding me to do anything, you're just talking about the sport. So I can safely assume you're not trying to command me to be part of a team. You're just explaining about it. And so we need to turn be, the verb, into the gerund of the verb, which would make this a noun. The way we do that is by adding ing. And most verbs can do this. Run becomes running. Eat becomes eating. These kinds of things. But it's a very common word form error to start a sentence with just the base form of the verb when it should be the verb with the ing to make it a gerund. And again, if you needed some extra help with that, the word I keep on saying is this word gerund here. You can look it up on Google and find some more about that. And so instead of it, our sentence starting with be, our sentence would start with the word being. Being part of a team sport like soccer, basketball, or volleyball has many advantages. Perfect. So now our verb, that was a command, is now not a verb anymore. It's a noun. So that's taking the place of our subject. And here we have our verb, which is has. So our subject here, being part, and has many advantages. So that's great. The next error that we need to talk about is a run together sentence or fragment error. A run together sentence means that you have lengthened a sentence incorrectly. And in English, the main ways we lengthen a sentence incorrectly is by not using a conjunction or a semicolon where we should. A fragment is kind of the opposite, that what you wrote is not a complete sentence and needs additional words in order for it to be complete. The first thing we want to remember about a sentence or run together sentences is that every sentence has at least one subject and one verb. And we need that. To add subjects and verbs properly in English, there needs to be one of two things happening. Either you need an embedded clause, and that clause using a clause that starts with which or what, or more commonly, we need to use a conjunction. In English, we cannot have sentences that have subject, verb, with no conjunction in the middle. Conjunction or embedded clause in the middle. We need that in English. In many other languages, especially in Romance languages, you can simply have subject, verb. In English, you can't do that. That's not how we write. And so it becomes a run together sentence for us. So, an example here. Demi Lovato is an American singer, songwriter, actress, and television judge. She is very talented, but also famous for oversharing her private life. Now, this is a great sentence. I thought this was a really good point this author made in the essay, but it is a run together sentence. So, if you have something marked on your paper that says run together sentence, the first thing you want to do is find the subjects and verbs in your sentence. And I did that below. Our subject here is Demi Lovato, and our first verb is an is. And notice, subjects and verbs always like to stick together. And so a lot of times language teachers call these subject-verb pairs because where you find one, you always find the other. They really like to be next to each other. Next subject and verb pair is she is. And those are our only two subject and verb pairs. Like I mentioned before, in English, we never have a subject, verb right next to each other. And we never have a subject, verb, comma, subject, verb, period. We never do that. I don't know how to, no, we never do that. So if you see here, Demi Lovato is, and then we have our object, an American singer, songwriter, actress, and television judge, comma, she is very talented but also famous for oversharing. A comma in English is not strong enough to hold together a sentence of this size. In other languages you can do this, but in English you can't. Like I mentioned, a subject and a verb with an object, comma, subject and a verb, period, just does not work. There's a couple ways to fix this. The most popular of which is to do subject, verb, period, subject, verb, period. So instead of this being two sentences held together by a comma, it would be two sentences with a period mark in the middle. Another way to fix it is subject, verb, colon, semicolon, subject, verb, period. Like I mentioned before, this is really the most common and popular way to solve your problem. Instead of holding a sentence together with a comma, you would just put a period mark instead. And so what we could do here is put a period and capitalize she, and then there's no problem. Very, very easy fix.